Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Okay, we'll get started. It's really an honor to have Bob Mankoff back with us again. Bob's the cartoon editor of The New Yorker and founder of the Cartoon Bank. You can read more about the Cartoon Bank. It's a fabulous endeavor that Bob's been the spirit and organizer and entrepreneur behind. Bob developed a distinctive dot style, which you can see in some of his cartoons, for his own vehicle of transmitting his ideas of sense of humor. He had his first cartoon published in The New Yorker in 1977, and he's been serving as the magazine's cartoon editor since 1997. To date, he's had more than 900 of his cartoons published in The New Yorker. I asked him earlier why he hadn't reached 1,000. I think he's just nervous about dealing with success, and he's wrestling with that concept right now. One of his cartoons is considered one of the most popular cartoons at The New Yorker of all time. He's edited multiple volumes of cartoon collections, including the complete cartoons of The New Yorker. About a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months, I forget now, time's going fast these days. Yeah. He was here and gave a book talk on his new book, How About Never Is Never Good For You, My Life in Cartoons, published last year, which will be out in paperback this October. There's actually an HBO film coming out about Bob, cartooning, and The New Yorker cartoons. It'll be in theaters in November, and then in December 7th, to be precise, or 8th. I won't say a celebration of Pearl Harbor Day or anything like that. It'll be on HBO. On some background that might interest folks here, especially Microsoft researchers, Bob graduated from Syracuse University's College of Arts and Sciences in 1966. He entered the doctoral program at City University of New York to pursue a degree in experimental psychology. Hanging out with him this week and when he was here earlier and doing research with him and Daphne Shahaf, it's been really like working with a senior professor of psychology in the field of humor. He's just really, he seems to have more insights and in-depth knowledge of literature and research than anyone else I've ever met. This might interest people here, especially the interns who are at this talk. At age 30, just short of completing his dissertation, Bob decided to use his know-how in a new way as a professional cartoonist, and that dissertation is still waiting to be drafted, and I get the sense it might be drafted in another form someday. So 40 years later, after learning a lot about humor from books and a lot from life, as he told me in a note, he's actually giving a psychology class. He's getting more serious about psychology, working with colleagues, and he'll be teaching a course at Swarthmore on the psychology of humor. We found him very engaging here, and we're actually booting up a humor effort at Microsoft Research, hopefully involving Bob. I personally think that humor says a lot about human cognition, and it gets at some of the mysteries. I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface of what it all means for us, our computational systems, and the future of our understanding of principles of cognition. And with that, Bob Mankoff.
Thank you. Let's scratch that surface. Let's go a little bit further. Well, taking humor seriously, humor is one of the profound questions. Psychologists are interested for how much it reveals about personality, cognitive scientists for how it actually works, personality, psychologists for what it tells you about humor. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of it. And see, I said, taking humor seriously, 100% satisfaction guaranteed, that's going to be impossible. Too early for 100%, 75%. That's my general advice about things. Because in terms of humor, here's what 100% satisfaction looks like. That's my first wife. Try to think about why you laughed at that. Try to think about one of the things. E.B. White said, analyzing humor is like dissecting a frog. Nobody's much interested in the frog dies. So I'm going to analyze it, so I'm going to kill a few frogs.
Is that really your first wife?
No, of course not.
All right.
And that's the thing about humor. Humor violates Gricean maxims. To tell the truth, to give only as much information, everything. Humor actually, we lie to tell the truth. What truth did you realize in that when I said, even though it wasn't my first wife, that there's all sorts of things that could go on in a marriage. Okay, now, we think humor is this great thing, this response, you know, good sense of humor, wonderful thing. Historically, that's not the case. It's Lord Chesterfield, this is his advice to his son. Brilliant letters of all things, how to behave, etiquette, politics. Here's his advice about humor. Frequent and loud laughter is the characteristic of folly and ill manners. How low and unbecoming a thing laughter is, not to mention the disagreeable noise that it makes, and the shocking distortion of the face that occasions I have never laughed in my life.
Look at that face.
I never laughed in his life. Yeah, of course he never laughed in his life. But this is not an uncommon attitude, because when you looked at that response, it's a little scary in a way. It's been, this is about 1656, okay? But when we go back further, Plato, what humor is, it's a mixture of pleasure and pain that lies in the malice of amusement. The malice, okay? Aristotle, the ludicrous is a species of the ugliness which causes no pain or destruction. Okay, Hobbes, and this is superiority theory. What laughter is, it's the sudden glory arising from some conception of eminence in ourselves in comparison with others. Well, obviously some truth in all this, isn't it? Watch TV, watch America's Funniest Home Videos, look at pranks on YouTube. What's happening there? They're pretty, you know, so that's sort of historically. Basically, they thought, oh, the humor was this. The Three Stooges. Not really, of course. They understand it was more complicated than that. And, you know, when you look at it historically, Plato would say, Aristotle would say, tragedy is about people better than ourselves. And humor is about people who are worse than ourselves. Now, it doesn't have to be people, okay? Here's me and the Microsoft robot here.
Get some directions.
Hi, I'm Bob. What's your name? Oh, he went to sleep.
Hi there. Do you need directions?
I do, but I'm a little bit wary of taking them from someone who doesn't know their own name. How do I get to Eric Horvitz's office?
Eric Horvitz's office is 3126. To get there, walk to the end of that hallway. Turn left and continue on to the end of the corridor. Eric's office will be the last office on your right. By the way, I'll let Monica, his virtual admin, know that you're on your way. By the way, would you mind swiping your badge on the reader below so I know who I've been talking with?
I'm sorry, I don't have a badge. I'm a visitor.
You're looking for Ben Cutler, correct?
No, I'm sorry. I said I'm a visitor.
You're looking for Mariah Christensen, correct?
Incorrect. I said I'm a visitor.
Or what are you looking for?
I'm looking for a robot who could intelligently
Sorry,
respond to my
you
question.
wanted the cafeteria, correct?
No, I'm sorry. That's incorrect.
So, you're looking for Roland Fernandez, right?
Oh, I'm sure Roland Fernandez is a very nice guy, but I don't even know who he is.
Roland Fernandez is in office number 3426. To get there, walk to the end of that hallway. Turn right and continue end of the corridor. Roland's office will be the second last office on your left.
Thanks. You've been very helpful within your own limited capacities. I do appreciate it. Okay, so once again, we're seeing this. And a little bit of the problem is, you know, computer systems, you have this is something they're lacking, and this is something actually we're interested in. And, you know, here's this interesting thing on Jeopardy when Watson was on, you know, and beat Ken Jennings, and it sort of interests something here.
William Wilkinson's An Account of the Principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia
inspired this author's most famous novel. 30 seconds, players. Good luck. Over to Ken Jennings now. 18,200 going in. Bram Stoker is what we're looking for, and we find. Who is Stoker? I, for one, welcome our new computer overlord.
Okay, so that's something Ken Jennings did that the computer couldn't. Interesting, right? How he handled that. Now, looking back on the history of humor, even the Talking Talk, 1657, this is from 1875. This is George Vassy. He would have been very happy with computers that didn't have humor because he thought humor was quite a terrible thing. He said, the superlative laugh or highest degree of laughter. And you think, well, that's good. He didn't think laughter was good. He said, ooh, look, the sardonic sneer or furtive leer. Ooh, that's bad. The self-conceited smile, a smile of self-esteem. The insidious smile, totally racist. So he thought all humor was basically this, not all of it, but basically it was going back to Chesterfield in that humor was this sort of rather low response. Okay. Now here, this is great. This is from that book. He thought that we could just eliminate laughter if we stopped tickling children, because that's how we teach them to laugh. And he did say that it was really bad because it could not infrequently ended in death. Now, the view of humor wasn't singular like that because, first of all, it wasn't humor they were talking about, it was ridicule. So Shaftesbury says ridicule is the true test of truth, which meant then in the exchange of ideas back and forth, if your idea couldn't put up with ridicule in something, there was something fishy about it. It's like a bullshit detector, right? Okay, and so and even at this time, this is about in the 18th century, where repartee and ridicule is very highly valued. Here'd be an example. Upon my soul, Wilkes, I don't know whether you'll die upon the gallows or of syphilis. That will depend, my lord, on whether I embrace your principles or your mistress. So this was valued, but it's ridicule. It's not what we think of humor. Here's a Google engram that's sort of interesting for sense of humor. The phrase doesn't really even exist as a common phrase until the 1860s, okay? And here, 1880, 80, it rises, it's huge in the 40s, rising again here. Now, why is that? If you actually put it in a Google answer, what you get is sense of ridicule. And ridicule is different than humor. I mean, we might like it, we might think it's interesting, it's cognitive, it's clever and everything, but not necessarily admirable, right? So what is it that's good about a good sense of humor? Okay, this is from 1876. Okay, so by the 1860s, this idea of a sense of humor being a cardinal virtue, something that you don't have to be necessarily funny, but if you said about someone they have no sense of humor, it becomes a real insult, right? So it says, a fashion has sprung in late years regarding the sense of humor as one of the cardinal virtues. And that follows that everybody supposes that he possesses the quality himself and that his neighbors do not. It is indeed rarer to meet a man, woman, or child who will confess to any deficiency in humor than to a want of logic. Many people will confess they are indolent, superstitious, unjust, fond of money, of good living, or flattery. Women will make a boast of cowardice and men of coarseness, but nobody ever admits he can't see it. You'll take an argument. So, what he's saying there shows you that's relatively recent. He's making a point. And so it is only really in the late 19th century. And then you say, well, why? What is it? Because it's very different than Aristotle or Plato. They are looking and seeing what is funny is it's out there. It's out there. It's not, okay. And so it's ludicrous. It's a hunchback. It's someone who's lame. It's someone who stutters. It's someone who's ugly. It's like looking at red. We see funny, right? Our view is it evolves to be able to see not only ridicule, but a sense of the absurd, okay? A sense that something is ridiculous. So when I'm walking around all the time and I look at things, I constantly see them as absurd. I got a message from classmates of, it said, you're unforgettable. One person has looked at your profile. Seeing the absurd seeing the absurd in things. But a good sense of humor means more than that now, right? It means being able to, rather than just cast out and look, to cast out and then see yourself as absurd. And that's why we value it, because we just don't think it means being able to get a joke or be funny, but it enables us to see ourselves in perspective. Okay. And then after, if you look at the rise of comedy as an industry, that's all after the Civil War. Not like there's not comedy before, and there's not jokes before, there's all of those things before, of course, but not until the sense of humor becomes valorized in this way do you actually have vaudeville, silent films, you know, sort of where we are now. In New Yorker comes about in 1925. What?
Question?
Yeah.
Given how we're immersed in our culture, we don't really see outside of it.
Yeah.
It's hard. Given that there seems to actually be a shift, fashion spike in humor going from an odd thing and something to be suppressed like a bad sneeze in a crowd to a virtue, a fashion of late. What about the cultural aspects? I mean, this is like, I see it looks like UK and America, but it may not have been shared by the world. And
In fact, humor, the word humor, originally it has to do with it's physiological. We have black bile, yellow bile, blood, and phlegm, and it's thought that the composition interaction is determined our health. But then it was thought, well, you know what? These interactions also determine our psychology, and they need to be balanced. And someone who had an extreme of one or the other was eccentric, a man of humor. Now, a man of humor at that time was actually someone who was eccentric, unbalanced. And there's a whole comedy of humors. So it's an English word. It's an English word. And then eventually someone who could create these characteristics was called a humorist. So both in England and America, it becomes very valuable. In France, it's much more positioned as ridicule, rather than this. And if you look if you look up books that are supposed to be humorous, it will say in the Library of American Wit and Humor. Wit and humor. It distinguishes the two. Wit is this type of clever stuff. Humor is something that comes out naturally of the personality of a human being, of characteristics. If you think of old-fashioned shows like the Andy Griffith Show, this warm, type of humor. So it definitely is. Humor is absolutely universal in that when you look at different nationalities, ethnicities, all the peoples of the world, laughter looks the same, smiling looks the same. What they laugh at and the stimuli that produce it are, of course, very different. But I want to go way back. What does evolution tell us about humor? Well, this is a cartoon I did. Okay. It's very, very deep in mammals. The laughter is very, very deep. Okay? It's social. It's a form of communication. What it communicates is playing. All animals play. The play is usually aggressive. It looks like fighting, right? Looks like fighting, but it's not fighting. Okay, so I want to start with rats.
As we have listened to animals playing, we have heard what appeared to be the sounds of laughter. We decided to tickle some animals. And we realized that we had to look at the sounds at a very different register than we can hear. We could tickle animals and generate a lot of vocal activity that appeared to be laughter. These animals would begin to enjoy our company, and they would start to play with our hands, and wherever we would put our hands, they would follow it. And when we tested these animals to ask whether they were enjoying this kind of activity, the unambiguous answer was yes.
Now, the most astounding result of that study is that he has talking rats. That's it. Okay, moving up sort of the primates. Now, the chimp is going to laugh. The laughter of the chimpanzee is different than ours because it's laughter on the inhale and exhale. We laugh completely on the exhale, and that's why it's also part of our speech. because you think of laughter coming at the end or the beginning. Actually, there's laughter throughout speech. And it's part, so all of our laughter is ha ha. It's like that, different with jokes.
Here it comes! It's coming. It's coming to get you! Here it comes, Alfie. Here it comes, Alfie. It's coming!
They're just like with a child, really, right? I mean, exact. So that shows you, this is a deep, deep response. This is up a little bit. This is more cognitive. And what you're going to see not so much as laughter. In the chimp, you're going to see the play face, and you're going to see the daddy chimp playing with his son, kid. And you'll also see aggression, but it's more like a peekaboo thing. It's different. Watch. Okay. So he bops him on the head. Now that's, this relaxed is called the play face. Sort of like a smile. But once again, having elements of sort of type of aggression, a fake. So whereas she came in and tickled the chimp, right now he's going in like that, right? Okay, move up a little bit. Here's his kid. Now he's going to watch him.
Here we go. Here we go.
Okay, so you know a lot about humor just from that. Now, he did something different. He wasn't tickled. He did something wrong within a frame of play. He did something wrong, and you laughed also because something wrong happened, okay, but was also okay. Okay, so just a little one. So humor is a type of play, not always, but to experience, we need to be in a playful state or mind. Now, we can switch out of it, but in general, most humor will come when we're moving back and forth between purposeful and playful states. And we mark that, we signal that all the time. So we reverse back and forth. So serious is we're goal-oriented, playful, we enjoy things for its own sake. Serious, we're future, we're present-oriented. When we're serious, high arousal is unpleasant. When we're in a serious mood, we don't want to be, incredibly loud. When it's the reverse when we're in play, we actually want high arousal. Here's a good example. Okay, so once again, this is pleasure, arousal level. So when we're relaxed and purposeful, if we're all of a sudden highly aroused, we're going to feel anxious. When we're playful, we want to be excited. And a good example is like a roller coaster. High arousal.
Here we go.
And interestingly, it laughs. Interestingly, so you're having here this sort of synergy of you're in danger, but you're safe. You're in danger, but you're safe. A lot of humor will be in that frame. You're in danger, but you're safe. Now, last time I was here, Eric took me for a ride in his Tesla in the parking garage. He floored it. And he went, Dad! So what happened? So I went up online and said, what happens to people in a Tesla when they have malicious friends who want to do it? So what?
Might not go as fast. So I'm going to drop my phone on.
So it's a Tesla.
All right.
We're going to do a little launch right here. You guys ready?
Yeah.
It's like on three, I'm going to launch it. Ready? On three. 1.
Once again, like the roller coaster, right? So this combination of danger and safety, danger and safety.
I don't want shit. I just wasted freaking money on my passes and odds.
Yeah, like ride an accelerator.
And then the laughter becomes social. Okay, so when you look at fear, anger, so you see clearly we're looking at things even from just the physiognomy of it, and even some of the physiology of it, they're actually fairly close. When you look at laughter and crying and stuff, there are differences, but they're close. Here's a great thing that shows that it's almost like slow motion of showing you the thing with this kid. The mom sneezes. Okay, mom sneezes and then. So he reacts with fear. Okay, see, it becomes adapted to it, right?
Silly baby. Does Mummy's nose scare you when I blow it? Does that scare you when Mummy blows her nose?
In a way, the kid is also being trained to understand, really to understand that. So this is clearly an unusual response. Usually you don't have that. Usually you don't have that break. But here you do. So social aspects of laughter. So a lot of times in laughter, nothing from a real cognitive standpoint or a very big thing seems to be happening. We're just having fun, right? So it communicates this is play, gives pleasure, induces laughter and other. And that's sort of an important response. It's an important bonding response that people are having in the car. Yeah, that's an initial response. And that initial response, so one very simple theory of humor from an evolutionary point is it's a false alarm response. It's a false alarm in that something appears to be dangerous. It turns out very quickly not to be dangerous or be relief laughter, and we loudly signal. Both we regulate our emotions and we signal to others that it's okay. This interesting book by a guy, Robert Provine, and that's in it about laughter. Some facts just about laughter as it occurs. It's 30% times more frequent when with people than alone. So almost all of your laughter or humor responses will be either social or pseudo-social. People laugh very, very rarely when they're alone. And with the experiments we did here, people were looking at cartoons, caption contest cartoons, and rating them, but you're very rarely going to get any laughter, in that situation. People don't realize how much they actually laugh when talking. So it's about 6 times just in normal conversation. So it's interesting. If you have people keep a diary of how often they're laughing, it's like a dieting diary. They have no idea. Okay. In conversation, you're much more likely to laugh after what you say than in response. Okay. Also, when we look at jokes and stuff, most humor does not occur. Most humor occurs in the social, in social reactions. Okay, so there's all different types of laughing with and laughing at. Now, and these are all these audience factors. I won't go through them, but it sort of details the things that potentiate humor and the opposite. So if an agent, object, and audience are all sort of, there's a commonality, you're likely to get laughing with. Here's a video of Orrin Hatch at a prayer breakfast. Okay.
Oops. Oh dear.
So his cell phone.
Is that your alarm for your prayer? I never learned how to turn that alarm off.
Okay, so this is the type of laughter that is a bonding type of laughter within a group that tells everything is okay. Okay, let's look at something different. So this is Jon Stewart ridiculing Jim Cramer during the financial crisis of 2008. So very different here because, okay, we'll look at it. The audience share a commonality, okay, but not with the object, okay? And so let's watch this.
Did it and saved a lot of people.
Let's show the tape that he from last night, okay? What he said about you.
Jim Cramer, I apologize. That was out of context. Technically, you were correct. You weren't suggesting to buy Bear Stearns. That was something that you did 5 days earlier in your buy or sell segment.
I believe in the Bear franchise. You know what? It's $69. I'm not giving up on the thing.
He's not saying literally, I'm asking you to buy Bear Stearns. For that, you'd have to go back a full 7 weeks before the stock completely collapsed.
I'm asking people who are watching this video to buy Bear Stearns.
Okay, so you can see one of the things, so is laughter contagious? Well, it's not contagious if it's about you. No, is it? Because we saw his face fall, right? Originally, it's not contagious about you. So that's interesting. So we understand that the laughter and humor in general is has multi-purposes. It can bond, but it also, it can criticize, it causes conformity. That's one of its main purposes also. Simple model here is so if you like Jon Stewart and you ridicule someone you dislike, you get maximal humor. The other way, the reverse. So this is dispositional humor, and it will explain a lot about what people laugh at and influence, whereas so rather than thinking the stimulus, this thing is absolutely funny, this thing is unfunny, we have to understand the functions of humor. So that would be minimal humor. Okay. One of the things humor does besides, ridicule, it maintains hierarchy. So some cartoons. Honestly, fellows, I only laughed that hard because his remark struck me as funny. The boss is funny. All right, Rogers, I know I made a humorous remark, but in my opinion, you laughed hard enough. Okay, so we know that also. I have no doubt that I could listen to a board meeting or a committee meeting in another language for an hour, and by seeing who laughed, at what, how long they talk, you would know who was the leader, actually. This is an interesting sort of thing. Okay, so the boss is funny, right? Oh, I got to go back one. Sorry, the boss is funny. Now, here's a really interesting experiment. That's a lame joke. That's the joke they use in the experiment. So there are two muffins baking in an oven. One of them yells, "Wow, it's hot in here," and the other replies, "Holy cow, a talking muffin." So here's the experiment. You make a fake boss and a fake underling. Right there, that you're doing a task and I pay you. In that experiment, you either have the boss or the underling tell that joke. You just made the boss, this fake boss, and there's a huge difference in who's laughs. Okay, not only that, people who are not even in the experiment looking through a panel think the boss, this temporary boss, is funnier. That also will explain a lot of humor. I don't have the video of this here because I cut it out for time purposes, but if you watch Jon Stewart on his show versus Jon Stewart at the Academy Awards, you'll see on his show he needs very little to get a laugh. In the Academy Awards, where he's not the boss and Jack Nicholson doesn't give a shit about him, it's a lot harder. So one model of humor is, it's a setup. We tell the joke. If we can predict it, we're not going to think it's funny. If we do predict it, we find out, we find the rule. Now, jokes actually go back quite a long way. Here's some of this is a guy performing jokes from the Philogeus, the world's oldest joke book, from 2,500 years.
Goes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, when I wake up, I'm all dizzy. And then after half an hour, I'm okay." Well, wait half an hour before waking up.
This is from 2,500 years ago.
One of a pair of twin brothers dies. When a student dunce runs into the surviving twin, he asks, "Did you die? Or was it your brother?" Well, someone tries to needle a quick-witted man by telling him, "I had your wife for free last night." But he just says, "Me? I'm forced to put up with it. What's forcing you?"
Okay, so we see something, how back. Now, actually, jokes actually pretty much disappeared for a long, long time. The Romans sort of revived it, but in the Middle Ages, they become these much longer narratives.
Ginsberg is a resident.
Old Jews telling jokes.
He's ready to go to Florida for the winter, and he goes in to see Dr. Schwartz, an internist. And the doctor said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, I've been having these silent gas emissions, and I just don't know what to do with it, and it's causing a lot of problem and a lot of embarrassment." And the doctor said, "Well, tell me about it." He said, "Well, the other night we were playing bridge. My wife and I were at the Grossmans, and during the course of the evening, I probably had 6 or 8 of these silent gas emissions. It created a little bit of a noxious odor, but they were all silent, so there were really no problems. We went home, and it happened again the other night at dinner, so I decided to come see you. As a matter of fact, I've had 8 or 10 of these incidents as I sit here before you today." He said, "What can you do for me, doctor?" He said, "Well, the first thing I'll do is send you to a hearing specialist."
So these are old guys. Now, see, this joke actually is a different joke. In the other ones have sort of these moron jokes and stuff. And in this joke, there's a hidden narrative. Okay, and I'll tell the one that I like and that I've told Eric if he likes it. It's There's this firm, Schwartz, 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 and Schwartz. A guy calls him and says, I'd like to speak to Mr. Schwartz. He said, I'm sorry, Mr. Schwartz is ill. Well, then please let me speak to Mr. Schwartz. Sorry, Mr. Schwartz is on vacation. Well, then could I speak to Mr. Schwartz? Mr. Schwartz is in a meeting. Well, then could I speak to Mr. Schwartz? Speaking. Well, so in that joke, there's a hidden narrative. Okay, there's something else happening. Those types of narrative jokes, these called tricolon jokes, where you build, are relatively a relatively recent development. Okay, cartoons are jokes. Okay, French Army knife. Okay, Einstein in bed. To you, it was fast. Okay, this is Hamlet's duplex. Now, one of the things what we're building on now is you have to get those jokes. There's a moment when you get it, right? And so this is stuff I did at the university.
So you can take a seat here.
There's a saying in comedy that timing is everything. Well, in this lab, comedy is timed all right, in the milliseconds. Actually, it's the reaction to a joke that's being studied here, thanks to this contraption. It's called an eye tracker, and it will monitor the eye's every movement, even a change in pupil size, as the volunteer looks at various cartoons. Why? Well, it turns out that the eyes are much more than a window to the soul. They could also reveal if and when you get a joke.
So the stuff we did there was, so here, look at this. It says, many women are more at ease with a female doctor. That's why I'm wearing the wig. And so this is pupil size, okay? And in these, I mean, I've cherry-picked this a little bit because actually the data is a lot more variable. But when you look at it, it moves. So they read the caption, and then at that point is also when they tend to get the joke. When the pupil size, when they realize when they put the two things together. And pupil size was related. How much the pupil pop was related to how funny it was. Lots of different types of humor. I mean, different ways to look at it. One of them is, incongruity, weirdness. So some humor is sort of based pretty much in reality. Yes, he has deep pockets, but I never realized how short his arms are. You get the joke there. Here, much more absurd. The ringing in your ears, I think I can help. We're putting the two things together. Here, much more absurd. That's what I hate about this city. You roast in summer, you freeze in winter, and the rest of the time it's carnivorous pig bats. Okay, now you understand there's nothing necessarily to put together, right? Nothing really necessarily in that way to put together like French Army Knife, Hamlet's Dupac, and yet people find it funny. Now, of course, it's a sequence. Now, the interesting thing is, so we look at what we call incongruity resolution, although the incongruity still remains, and that actually is a personality variable. People, it's not like you don't like this joke. You can still think it's a joke. But people who have a preference for this type of thing, if they're asked to create patterns, they'll create more regular patterns rather than more random ones. They'll tend to like more abstract. In other words, they'll be more open to various types of experience that they don't necessarily have to explain. They don't have the need for this complete closure. It's more like that. And they'll be more likely to vote this way. Absolutely. If you actually look at the type of stuff, so you can see the continuum between corny, absolutely, you know what I mean? I get the joke completely, everybody can get it, and I enjoy it. I enjoy a certain randomness, a certain openness to experience. Here's another thing, okay. This is the classic comedy triangle. You have a source, you have a setup, and you have a punchline. It doesn't have to be divided as source. And this is the work you have to do over here to put it together, okay? So you're going to have to put it together. So here, okay, Hamlet's duplex is the setup. The punchline is this, and you have to do some sort of cognitive work. Now, the cognitive work is actually more than just saying, oh, that's from Hamlet's soliloquy. You also have to actually put in to be and not to be that works for a thing. what's interesting about how quickly we do all this type of cognitive work. How jokes die. There's lots of different ways. You can have in the punchline setup. You can tell too much. There's lots of different ways. I mean, this is from an interesting book, What Are You Laughing At? By a guy, Dan O'Shannon, who was a comedy writer for Modern Family and stuff. But he's got a million diagrams, and they're interesting. Now, a joke can die in a lot of ways. So here, for instance, you might not have sufficient information to understand this joke, right? You might not know that wagging your tail is a signal to go for a walk, and that in baseball, a pitcher is going for a walk. Another way jokes, so this is a joke of mine, accounting department, legal department, jail. Okay, it's actually got to work that way. It can't work this way. So although the incongruity, if we were just talking about incongruity theory, it would be the same, right? All of a sudden you have a jail. Yet you don't have the sequence. You don't have the surprise that you need. That's how a lot of jokes work. I started my vegetarianism for health reasons. Then it became a moral choice. Now it's just to annoy people. So it's like those three doors. I could not start. I could not reverse that, and it'd be a joke. So the book is interesting. Lots of that. It's not. These are schematic. It would be while it does make a lot of sense to actually then operationally define, on each side, but we sort of know that's the case. We do know that there can be high, medium, and low levels of incongruity, that things could happen right within the frame of reference. How probable is this in the real world? And on the other side, we would know, well, how much cognitive work does it take you to put it together? It's not, you would think, well, we want the most incongruity and the most, not necessarily. You can have very complicated jokes. So in a way, I think diagrams like this are a heuristic for saying, well, how might we explore? How might we actually explore, the phenomenon? Now, incongruity itself, I mean, it's weird because I've said the idea you need resolution, right? So this is not very incongruous, right? It's just a talk show. Talk show, okay. Now it's a little incongruous. There's a prisoner over there, right? Now it's weirder. And you sort of think it's funny, but there's no resolution, right? Most people will still think this is funny, even though there's no resolution. Now, it may be going back to my psychology background and saying, well, why? Because sometimes I do find if you just show this to people, they'll actually laugh. There's no joke to it. Interestingly, if I went back to make a joke, you're best off with two levels of association. My feeling is that it's sort of a generalized response to things that we normally respond to as funny. Oh, even worse, okay? Now even more incongruity, right? But it would be an impossible problem to solve as a joke, because now you would have to think of all the frames of reference. So going back to humor theory, Arthur Koestler was a novelist and came up with this idea of bisociation. And the idea is that in most jokes and in most humor which has this cognitive element, you're putting together two frames of reference, two different frames of reference. You slept with her, didn't you? Okay, you're putting it in the frames of reference what you know about human sexual behavior, what you know about praying mantises. Here, Lassie get help, Lassie gets help. Now, the other part of this idea of appropriate incongruity, it's appropriate in a way, we get it, and yet it's also spurious. One of the markers that it's funny is that it's illegitimate. The logic is illegitimate. None of this works. You know what? He's dead. He can't be talking to her. And you know what? He can't be talking. Here also, this couldn't happen. So humor is different, let's say, than just straight metaphor, where you can have incongruity. You can bring together different frames of reference, because we understand there's also an illegitimacy to the logic. There's a pseudo-logic involved. The other thing that happens in humor is script opposition. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is to look at the cognitive parts of it and look at the emotional parts of it. Now, script opposition is, this goes back to cognitive theory. Script how the world works. When you see a doctor is supposed to be solicitous, he cares about you and whatever. When you see a cartoon of the doctor, the script is interesting. You've got two scripts in your mind now. One of the scripts is what we know about doctors, which is they're good and they care. And the other thing is it can't, because it's a cartoon. So So it has to be about something bad, some danger, even though it's a pseudo-danger here. You'll be awake during the entire procedure. The anesthesiologist is on vacation. So how much of the humor there is due to the script opposition, the arc from good to bad, and how much is there's another cognitive element? Being awake during the operation that's what we're putting together as the joke, right? It's not just like the doctor says, I'm going to be very bad to you. Oh, you thought I was going to be good, but I'm bad. That's not it. There's another cognitive element of that. Being awake during the operation usually means one thing, so we have to put together something cognitive. Okay, there's a whole theory called the general theory of verbal humor by Victor Raskin and Taro, which is all about script opposition, which is that all that's happening is that one script, we're going from one script to the other. This is Groucho Marx on Dick Cavett in 68. Okay, come on.
Speaking of audible, those old jokes, they survive because they're so good. They're great. That's why they survive. There used to be a joke about an actor was playing in vaudeville in a small town, and he got laryngitis. And looking for a doctor, he didn't know anybody. He walks along the suburbs of this little town. He finally comes to a cottage, and there's a sign outside, says Dr. Smith or Brown or something. And he can't talk very well. And he rings the bell, and a very pretty woman comes to the door, who is the wife of the doctor. And she opens the door, and he says, is the doctor in? And she says, no, come on in.
Okay, so the script, so when we look at script, good versus bad, real versus, this is from Raskin, rich versus poor, smart, dumb, high status, obscene versus non-obscene, compassionate versus callous. So we see that happen, but also there's the other element that we're putting together. Okay, so one of the things the script opposition tells you is that humor deflates, right? It deflates. Art, that's art. Beautiful, blah. That's not, right? Okay, that's funny because it's essentially a script opposition. It's going from one to the other. Okay, so the benign violation theory of humor is a little bit like script opposition. It's saying for something to be funny, we both have to think it's wrong and right at the same time. Wrong and right at the same time. Now, my feeling is humor is more than that that's a potentiator of humor, that when this happens, it's not all that's happening because there's the joke itself that's happening. But that's the idea, and it has some interesting applications. One of the things in benign violation, so that, the obvious thing is, when you have a tragedy, it has to be distant. The other prediction it makes is that for a mishap, a little thing going wrong, it has to be close. It has to be close. When the New Yorker, when there was a real tragedy in 2001 at the New Yorker, we didn't produce any cartoons. And then, what was the cartoon we were going to do right after? You would need something that actually wasn't really funny, but actually dealt with things mildly. So first cartoon was, I thought I'd never laugh again, then I saw your jacket. So mild, because you didn't really, do that. About a year later, I wouldn't mind living in a fundamentalist Islamic state. So you could do it. You couldn't do that. After 9/11, 1 week or 2 weeks, you couldn't do that. Because all of a sudden, this is such a serious event, you had to try to intersect with differently. Okay, this is a benign violation study I find interesting. Okay, so here's this picture. Now, Peter McGraw, who's done this, originally he investigated, emotions that we find shameful or disturbing. And he found that when he showed some of these things disturbing, people actually laughed. Okay, so let's look at this picture here. So it turns out that the distance that you move the picture from the retina actually determines whether or not people think it's funny. The closer it is, the more disturbing. Here, because it's less gruesome, it needs to be closer to be funny with the icicles. Also, also besides that, if you Photoshop the first gruesome picture, people think it's funny if they know it's Photoshop. If they think it's a real picture, they don't think it's funny, and the reverse for the other. So I think it's an interesting idea that tells you a lot pragmatically about how you deal with jokes and what you can do with them. So look at this joke from the New Yorker, okay? Now, that seems, most people would think that's a fairly benign joke, but the New Yorker, this is a story about Katrina. So people are in actually an empathetic mood. Now, most people didn't react to it, but here's how someone. Another joke on old white males, haha, the wit. It's nice, I'm sure, to be young and rude, but someday you'll be old unless you drop dead as I wish. So the New Yorker is a very sensitive environment. Here's another thing, an online study I did. So it says discouraging data on the antidepressant. So a lot of people liked it, but here are the different reactions. You know, these people liked it, this person didn't. I like animals, you know, five exclamation points, that's a lot. I don't want to hurt them, that doesn't seem very funny to me. I don't like to see animals suffer, even in cartoons. And, you know, I wrote back to this person, I said, they don't suffer. They can't suffer. They're cartoons. But this just shows you, you know, this environment. Look at this. I've only been gluten-free for a week, but I'm already really annoying. It's like that. Okay. Here's the letter. Okay. So within the New Yorker, you know, we live with a serious autoimmune disease. Try walking a mile in our shoes. And there's a great joke that really applies to this, that especially with these people, that makes sense because you'll be a mile away from them and you'll have their shoes. Okay, here's another one, the original. Okay. Now, so this is a little bit edgy for the New Yorker, right? A little bit edgy, and you're also having the wrong and right feeling, right? Wrong and right. But there's a cognitive part too, because but you have the wrong. I shouldn't be laughing at this, right? Yet I am laughing at this. Now it would be completely. It wouldn't work at all if we did that. It was important that I supplied the distance. Here's another example. So when Cecil the Lion was killed originally, you know, really there's no jokes originally. Because everyone says it's sad, it's bad, it's all these bad things. As you move a little bit away from the event, you will have jokes. So the original joke that came into the New Yorker, oh, I'm sorry, I got a little thing. So I'll tell what this is. So one of the things I've said, this is a slide that popped in there, but it makes the point, that humor has this danger involved into it. So that's what we like about a zoo. There's some danger. This would be a bad zoo, or not a good one, or a boring one. That also would be boring. That would be worse. But going to Cecil, this is the cartoon that actually came in. And I felt, you know what, this is too severe. Because, you know, it's a little bit too severe. To move it back a little bit, to make it more benign but make the same point, what I had the artist do was that. So just by thinking about it, rather than that, it changes the sort of gruesome thing that the guy's head is actually on the wall. Okay, now you know what's funny and why. Next, how to be funny. Well, you're computer people, so I thought I would make it easy for you. Here it is. Really, you know, it's a piece of cake. You do, really, every time you want to be funny, you're at a party, social, you're having a drink, you're at a bar, you want to pick somebody up. This is really it. And you'll come up with jokes like, why is an alone region different from a sole habitation? One is a lonely air, the other is an only lair. So it's okay, no, that's not okay. That's a very bad joke. That's a very bad joke. So, right now there's no algorithm for being funny, really being funny. You need a brain. And it says, it never ceases to amaze me what little brains people have. But I want to conclude by saying our brains are very little, but they go a long way when it comes to humor. Thank you.
Any questions or comments or humorous quips?
Yes.
Gloria?
So you showed a slide earlier where you showed arousal and positive, negative. Yeah. And it reminds me of Stanley Schachter, who you might...
I know exactly. So he injected
Exactly.
Right.
So that an emotion is a function of both arousal and a cognitive interpretation. So I was wondering, you also talked about how people tend to laugh more in social situations. Is it because there is an arousal, because social situations create more of an arousal, which makes...
Well, just to go back to the experiment, so the Schachter experiment was this. They showed people humorous clips and things like that. They either gave them a control thing, nothing, a sedative, or an amphetamine. And so when they were more stimulated, they joked. Now, along with that, there are other experiments which show that if you read either a horror story, pornography, or a neutral thing, anything that stimulates you before will actually lead to greater potentiation of the joke. And in humor theory, it's called transfer of excitation. So there's just transfer of excitation. I think absolutely that, so just being aroused, that's why, for example, I think we can agree the talk was great, but it would be greater like at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. No, I'm just, your responses, your arousal and all that. But what's happening in conversation in social situations is really multiple determined also. Because one of the things that's happening in conversation, because it's improvised, is that everything is surprising. Surprise itself is also, we're a species that both has to collaborate and compete. So there's an enormous, so social situations are fraught with tension and everything. That's why so all of those things are, absolutely, the transfer excitation is very interesting to think about when you think about what's funny. It's why people get warmed up for a comedy club. It's why comedians curse. Just saying fuck causes a certain amount of arousal. So a lot of the evolution of comedy towards this sort of strong stuff and things like that is all due to transfer of excitation. Yeah, go ahead.
A comment. Yeah, every comedy club I've been to makes you buy drinks, so you're more aroused and more ready to be.
Well, more aroused and more disinhibited.
Yeah.
So that you're both aroused, and also in terms of the benign violation, your censor. And this, there's a whole other part of Freudian theory in which, the essential function of jokes is to slip by the superego, the censor, so that you can have the enjoyment of impulses that would later, yeah, you're going to say?
And then the question was, so to me, there's like different kinds of laughter too, and you spoke about this, but like people who have power are laughed at more often. So there's like, I don't know, off the top of my head, like chuckling, like side-splitting laughter, nervous laughter, like we saw with the baby. So what are the different kinds of laughter?
Yeah, well, this is sort of a debate within the community. Are there that many different kinds of laughter, or is it more the context of almost the same laugh that we interpret? My feeling is there are absolutely, there is a variety of laughter. There's combination laughs, because we know there's a voluntary laugh, right? And so I would think that if you had the right audio equipment, you'll see all sorts of blend that you probably can tell an awful lot about the blending. In general, you'll see for a laugh to a joke, because the joke works in this punctate way, the laughter is also punctate. You know what I mean? It's ha. It's a few things, it's limited. Whereas in the event in the car and the Tesla and stuff, it goes on, because it starts as the reaction and then, performs those other functions. Are there questions?
What do you go for in the New Yorker? Like, what kind of laughter are you going for?
Smile of the mind. What do we go for in the New Yorker? Well, the humor is generally benign. It doesn't, punch down or punch up too much. It elbows to the side, because it's reflective of the social class that's reading it, and it has to work within that. So it's primarily either absurd or cognitive. In fact, it's hard to do because it doesn't pull on the usual historical levers of laughter, which are obscenity and aggression. And for me, it's more interesting that way, because it's definitely not the funniest in a way. The funniest stuff that people laugh at are what happens to them and are mishaps. Or actually, if you looked at just volume of laughter, they're laughing at people falling down on America's Funniest Home Videos. You had a question? Yeah, go ahead.
I've always wondered actually about the placement of the cartoons in the magazine. So is that something that you control directly? Do you actually take into account, the art?
All done algorithmically. No. the placement, that goes on right at the very end. The cartoons do many functions. One of them is humor. One is just like adjusting for the text, how long the articles are, the size of them and like that. And that'll come at the only thing about the cartoons is they can never relate to anything in the magazine or to the article, even peripherally. They have to have their own sort of, separate space. So that is interesting. If it's a completely topical cartoon, it will usually occur up front. That's that. Yeah.
I'm under the impression that shorter captions are funnier than long ones. So
Well,
well,
when Eric and Daphne and I did this stuff, in general, you will find that depending on what the person wants to communicate, if they're just dealing with the image themselves, you want the minimal stuff. If they're showing off, so this is not only a caption contest, it's an anti-caption contest in which the caption would be long and crazy. So there's all different things. It will depend on the context. In general, shorter is better, but let's just look at my cartoon that Eric referred to as the executive on the phone. He's looking at the appointment book, and he's saying, no Thursdays out. How about never is never good for you? It could end with, how about never? But it's better if it goes on. Why? Because when we're looking at the two areas of association, we're looking at politeness and rudeness. And when we want to match those up, we need the syntax of politeness to go on to say is never good for you. So, it's a general rule. What we're looking at when we did the stuff with Eric and I and Daphne is often the footprint of humor. But often different humor has different, footprints. I think you had a question.
No, I just had it.
You decided
to...
Yeah, go ahead.
So what about the difference between cartoons that have a caption and those that do not have a caption at all? Or videos, for example, like back in the days in the Charlie Chaplin short movies, you didn't have any.
Well, we have captionless cartoons. Now, often there is a setup and a joke, and you'll see, there'll be a sequence also that you'll see. There'll be something, or there'll be the same type of by association. If Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton, I would really advise you to look at those things closely, and you will see essentially what are setups and jokes. There's a sequence. If you look at a Buster Keaton movie, there will always be a setup and a payoff. Now, sometimes, of course, laughing will just be almost no cognitive work. Someone will throw a pie in someone's face, and then really you're back to the kid in the thing or the roller coaster. Something bad has happened, and then there'll be the whole sort of social context as well. Anything more? Yeah, go ahead.
I often hear people claim that the New Yorker cartoons have sort of an upper middle class tone to them. They're snobbish, they're in boardrooms and things like that. Are you guys sensitive to that? Do you worry about sort of appealing to the everybody?
So this is the shortest best joke I know. It says, pretentious, moi? I not intentionally. Actually, the New Yorker is really interesting. We actually think the audience and us are the same. There's no condescension at all. We are doing the general thing is we do what we like, and we hope you like it. When a new cartoonist comes in me, I said, don't do cartoons for us. Do what you like. Hope that we like it, and then we hope you like it. So it really is like that. We don't focus group, we don't do that, we just do it. And obviously the readership of the New Yorker is upper middle class, it is intelligent, so the things they're going to like are going to be, different than what Donald Trump would like. Yeah.
When you're thinking of a joke, does the theory help you, or did you just see your pants?
Theory is very inhibiting. It has to be a level below that. That's incorporated. So going back to the playful mode and the purposeful mode. So the mode that you have to be in is playful, essentially, to generate humor. To the degree to which you are in the purposeful mode, it's actually inhibiting. So it's absolutely useful for the analysis. And also it just shows the limitations. This is a bigger phenomenon than those diagrams, than my explanation of it. You know what I mean? It's an attempt to look at it. And those diagrams, if I'm saying, oh man, I'm too benign, I need more of a, there's no way to do that. But you do sense those things because all of psychological theory comes out of our intuitions from the start. It's not like, it's not like string theory. Each of these things is saying, oh yeah, set up or punchline, it didn't come down. So I do actually find it inhibiting. So, or one way it can work is to understand it in a way and then put it away. Like a lot of theory of sports and other, you work on it, and then if it exists at an unconscious level, because to come up with jokes, you have to associate really quickly. So you can't have any formula stuff in between it. It just has to happen, automatically. And I do it through play. So when I just try to play. When I went by the robot, I just started to play with it. I wanted to see, what was happening. More questions? Anybody? Yeah.
Pupil study. That was a very limited context in terms of humor. Like it was image and caption.
Right.
Does pupil size change for just purely auditory kind of humor? Or
I think pupil size always. Susan DeMace here. I think that pupil size actually is often indicative of cognitive strain of any type in a broad way. What I think will be more revealing. One of the things we'd like was something that isn't mediated ratings, how funny you thought. Now, the clearest thing, of course, is laughter, but in studies with subjects, you're not going to get that. But what I was talking to Eric about is, high-speed, high-resolution video of the face. I believe that will be very revealing about whether people really like it or not. And then there's a question how much relation there is between judgment when you judge. Let's say the gallows joke with a handicap. Let's say I asked you to judge that. Now your judgment of what you might think is right and wrong might come into your perception rather than how you actually reacted to it. Anything more? Yeah.
Well, actually, this is a question about share some advices because. Transforming from psychologist into a cartoonist, to me it's a big change, right? How did you figure it out? How did you have the? Well,
I was kicked out of psychology, so it wasn't like so a boot in the butt will transform you from one situation to the other. No, I was too creative for psychology because I had pigeons and it was experimental behaviorism and it was the 70s and they just wanted me to do reinforcement schedules and me and the drugs that I was on told me to do something else. But what happened is interesting was actually what's called a Zeigarnik effect. I was interrupted in this, that I was actually really interested in psychology. I was like crazy Jewish obsessed with the things I was obsessed with. And then it got interrupted because I wanted to do these experiments and I was on drugs. And so this is actually a funny story. So what I was doing was putting pigeons in a Skinner box, which they pecked at, okay? You had to put the pigeons in for 1 hour a day. And your PhD took you a whole year. And I was looking at these pigeons, and I realized they didn't have a union. And this was the drug talking. And why couldn't I just put them in the box 24 hours a day, give them the right amount of food, the right amount of water, and I would speed up my dissertation by a factor of, that factor. Well, I did that. I just put them in there, and I was up late at night with the Skinner box and looking at it and everything. But remember, there was the part about I had to feed them correctly and give them enough water. So I had the wrong schedule, and the pigeon died. And that actually led to my exit from psychology, although I thought it was very creative. But I came back to it. The Zeigarnik effect is you're interrupted in doing something. And then I don't know, it was about the year 2000 and stuff, and I'd always be keeping these databases of stuff, and I started to see in my mind what was known in a way about these overlapping maps. I kept seeing them, actually, I kept dreaming them. Oh, I see what I'm doing. Here, I'm associating this whole thing with this whole thing. Started to read up on it, and then in 2000, I went to the University of Michigan. I convinced them to let me teach a course. And so now I've been, the Zygarnik effect works very, very well for me. Because one of the disappointments I find in theory and in humor theory when I go to the conferences is that everybody's in their own little silo. They don't really want to know. They don't really, if the benign violation people don't want to talk to the incongruity. Everybody sort of made their bones with their papers and they're desperate to defend their little area and stuff, but there's very little eclectic stuff. So I'm actually quite frustrated. One of the reasons why it's nice, you know, to come out to Microsoft and do this is that you get this whole other energy going in, we have no dog in the fight. We're going to try to see, what was happening. Anything more? Yeah, go ahead.
So black humor, are there studies that show the same kind of demographic or personality differences among people that appreciate black humor and those who don't?
I think what you'll see a longitudinal arc from youth to age. As you yourself, have been subject to the 1,000, natural shocks that flesh is heir to, and your relations you're less likely to like humor about cruelty and death and really bad things happening. So most adults aren't going to like dead baby jokes. Okay, so I think that's worth saying. So look, thank you all. I really appreciate you coming.